This is Learning to Dad.
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
With Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm going to have fun, and you're going to have fun.
Hi, welcome to Learning to Dad. My name is Tyler Ross, and I'm here today with Chris Dull, who is the CEO of the global franchise group that manages and owns between around 1,500 plus between management and corporately owned stores, mostly in the restaurant franchise business.
Yeah, restaurants, everything from pizza to ice cream to cookies to corn dogs and lemonade.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, I'm super grateful for you to take the time to spend with me today and us as listeners. Thank you.
Of course.
So we were introduced by Mark Hodulik, who was also on the podcast. I wonder what's the connection between you guys?
Yeah, so Mark and I actually met when we were dadding. We were coaching, or I guess our kids were 4 years old playing t-ball.
Yeah.
So his oldest son Chase and my son Cotton were on the same team, and Mark was the head coach, and I came in as an assistant, and we have become very dear friends, and our kids play together, and we play together as adults.
That's wonderful. I had a great conversation with him. I can see why you would take to him as a friend. And I have so many notes here that I could jump all around, but we got right into sports. You were an athlete. You played football?
I did. I played football at Baylor University and was one of those kids that grew up and anything that had a ball or a bat or, any type of organized to get out there and play. I was in it and always loved football, started young. My brother was a football player, went to TCU and played football. And so that was always kind of the fabric of our childhood and into our young adulthood.
And I understand that it was an injury that kind of made you take the blinders off on your one-way path of being an athlete and to kind of realize that you had to chase something else after college. Can you talk a little bit about transitioning that mindset and what you did?
Yeah, I was a one-track guy from the time that I was in high school and saw that I had, the kind of the physical attributes and ability. Football was really all I thought about. Never really considered, when someone would ask you at 18, 19 years old, what do you want to do when you grow up? I wanted to play football. So I had the same answer when I was 5 to when I was 20. And so, my senior season at Baylor, I tore my ACL and MCL on a play. And, at that point, it was, the doctors made it pretty clear to me that based on the severity of my injury, it was highly unlikely that I'd ever be able to play football again. And so that was the first time I was sitting on a trainer's table at Jones Stadium in Lubbock, Texas against Texas Tech. And for the first time in my entire life, I thought, what am I going to do now that I can't play football? So, and that's a tough thought to get to let sink in. You're not only what you love doing, but even your identity. I mean, you've been an athlete all your life, and now you're being told that's not possible.
Yeah.
So it was a blow, both mentally and physically.
So once you finished at Baylor, you entered the workforce, and it sounded like from some of the research I've done that you kind of bounced around, had a lot of experiences in a kind of a brief amount of time. Tell me about kind of your first entry into the workforce and then the trajectory of that up until you had kids.
Sure. So I got married my junior year in college and had my first child shortly after graduating. And so, when I found myself unable to play football, graduating school with really no focus on career, I knew I had, 3 mouths to feed and I needed to get out and make some money. My ex-wife's family are farmers up in Northwest Texas. And so I decided I was going to be a farmer, and I moved out west and did that for a little over a year. And, it was really my first foray into, kind of the brass tacks of operating a business. And my father-in-law at the time was my boss and my mentor, and taught me a lot about kind of getting up and getting to work, and also managing, some of the dynamics that go into running a business. As a guy who grew up in the big city, Houston, Texas, living out in Las Buddy, Texas, with a population of 0, I could tell that this was not going to be my happy place, and decided I'd make the move to the city. And so I moved back to Houston, and at that time, just kind of went out looking for a job. I knew that, I had an entrepreneurial spirit, and my father was an entrepreneur and had several businesses as I was growing up. And as a child, I kind of, in the summers, I was the tag along. I was with my dad, whether we were going to the motel that he owned in a little town, or whether we were going to a piece of dirt that he was buying or selling, or, whatever it was. I was involved in Dad's kind of day-to-day business life as a child. And so I liked that. I liked the energy and the constant change. And so I actually was offered a job at Enron, which was a big job, with big company sitting in a cube, running a calculator. And then I was offered a job at Marble Slab Creamery, which was a family-owned franchise business that was some 50 units and really just starting to grow. And I much to the dismay of my family at the time, I decided to go to work for Marble Slab because I felt like it was a opportunity to really kind of capitalize on that entrepreneurial spirit and not get pigeonholed with a big company.
So at that point, you're 25-ish, you're married, you've got a daughter.
Yep.
That feels, I guess it depends on where you are in the country, like at what age people get married and have kids. It feels like, normal, as they say. But like, was that a total lifestyle change to you? Like, were you a mature 23-year-old ready to get married and have a kid? Or, you got married at 18, 19?
I would say that no 23-year-old is mature enough to be married and have a kid. I was a mature 23-year-old. I was a bit of an old soul, but I was still a kid. And there was a lot of pressure. Wife, child. Really no job skills, finding your way. It was very challenging, and my ex-wife and I, did not stay married long after we moved back to Houston, about a year. And then we divorced, and she took my daughter, Megan, and moved back to Lubbock, Texas, which was 600 miles from Houston.
Yeah.
And so I became a part-time dad to my daughter. And that was a very, very difficult place for me because I was always close with my father and my mother and my siblings. And I, wanted that for my daughter, and it was kind of taken from me.
Yeah.
So that made you grow up pretty quick.
Yeah, so what was time like? Like, you have to get this 600 miles every so often, get to spend time together?
Megan became a frequent flyer on Southwest Airlines when she was 5 years old.
Yeah.
She was coming in every other weekend for all major holidays, and I was going to Lubbock and spending time with her up there. And so I wasn't going to let distance keep me from having a fairly regular relationship with my daughter. And so, I did really everything I could financially and with my time to make sure that Megan was a part of my life and that I was a part of her life as well.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's not a unique circumstance in the sense that parents end up living in different places. They have to share custody of a child, or at least get to see the child. Like anyone that might be going through that now, looking down and saying, wow, my kid's going to live a couple hundred miles away from me. Is there any advice that you could give them to make that feel easier?
Yeah, I would say, so you have to accept your new normal, right? It's not going to be the same as if she lived around the corner or he lived around the corner. And so I think that you have to accept that this is a different situation, and you've got to find ways to make the most of it. One of the things that was important to me, and I think worked well for us, is I tried diligently to not let the animosity that I had towards her mother for moving her away get in between Megan and I having a relationship. You also have to understand that, if you're not the custodian of that child, that, your core values may differ greatly from your ex. And so if you're parenting in sound bites versus consistently day in and day out, it's very difficult to instill those values into your child. And so I think you can find yourself very frustrated if you expect that, because I don't think it's a realistic expectation. I think that, you do the best you can, but you have to accept your child for who they are and the way that they're living, because the bulk of the time they're being parented by, your ex and potentially, a step parent. So it's got to set your expectations, I think, realistically, or else you can find yourself very frustrated.
Yeah. I actually just told somebody in my office not half an hour ago that my kids will walk right by me to ask their mom to open something. It's like, talk about sound bites. I'm there every morning and every evening, and it still feels like sound bites. Like they want their mom all the time. But so
That's right.
So does she continue to live there, and you live in Atlanta now?
No, she moved to Atlanta about 4 years ago. And so Megan now lives in Atlanta and is here, and she's adulting now. And, this is the closest we've been as far as proximity ever. So it's been nice.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So back to your your career trajectory. So you took the job at Marble Slab, not at Enron. And,
That's right.
You're in your mid-20s at this point, and that franchise continues to grow.
Yep. So, I jumped in there, and it was a family-owned business. It was small, with a lot of demand and growth opportunity. And so I dug in, and, when I look back at the successes that I've had in my professional career, the way I got there was no different than the way I found my successes in athletics.
Mm-hmm.
It was about hard work, outworking the next guy, becoming an absolute student of what you were doing and learning every in and out and X and O and however you want to diagram it. And so while I was in the franchise business for the first time and was taking on roles that I had not participated in, I really worked very hard, and I studied and got to know the industry that I was working in the business, and really what drove success for not only our company, but our franchisees. And over time, I moved into a role as the executive vice president of Marble Slab Creamery. We sold the business to a publicly traded company out of New York, and that company asked me to move to Atlanta to run a newly forming business that was a multi-branded franchise concept. And so I made the jump, came to Atlanta, and I did that for a couple of years and was promoted to the president of that company. And then we sold that division off. And, while in that role, we were also acquiring new businesses. So we owned Marble Slab Creamery and Maggie Moo's and the Athlete's Foot, which was a footwear franchise.
Yeah.
And then we turned around and bought Pretzel Time and Pretzel Maker and Great American Cookies. And so we had built this nice shared service model, and we sold that to private equity in 2010. And I stayed on as CEO, and we sold the Athlete's Foot, bought a concept out of California called Hot Dog on a Stick, and then Round Table Pizza a year and a half ago. And so that's who we are today. And really, all the while through my career, it has been, it's been the same recipe. Be a student of your work. You can always be learning. There's different caveats to what you do, and you can always excel in your role as long as you're continuing to be a student and learn. And so I do that. I invest a lot of my time in not only, what at one point it was franchise sales. How do you do it? How do you do it well? Today, as a CEO of a multi-brand franchise company, it's about strategic financing options for the corporate entity and, public offerings and opportunities to really take the top of the business higher. And so I continue to be a student, and I also continue to work very hard. I keep my head down. I deal with adversity as it's thrown my way, and I just kind of keep fighting, keep grinding. Got to be gritty.
That's apparent based on that, summation of, 2 or 3 decades of applied effort. But this is also coming from a guy whose degree is in education, right? You were formally educated to be a teacher, yet you have become the full-time student.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, but I think, I think you have to be a learner. I think it's more important to be a learner than to be learned. If you keep an open mind and continue to learn, and you learn easily, which I think I'm a good learner, I think that's really important. I mean, when I graduated from college, I didn't even know what EBITDA stood for. And today it is the lifeblood of my every thought as I manage the P&L of this business. And so, you know, you have to be a learner. And I think I've been good at that.
so do you think that you are naturally a learner, or do you think that that's a skill that you kind of cultivated?
Yeah, I've always been a seeker of knowledge around things that were of interest to me. And the irony is my little boy, Cotton, who's 9 years old, is exactly the same way. Whatever he has an interest in, he wants to know absolutely everything he can about it. The challenge with Cotton is we need him to have that same drive and hunger for things that maybe he's not so interested in, like math. So, he's a great learner. It's training him to, apply that tenacity towards the things that maybe you're not as passionate about, but it's the necessary means to an end. But yeah, I think from an early age, I was hungry for knowledge.
Yeah. So you have had children in basically two different eras, one pre-iPhone and one post-iPhone, and
Yes.
you being constantly educating yourself, no doubt, were different 23 years ago than you were 9 or 10 years ago. But can you talk a little bit about your approach, as a parent then and now?
Yeah, I think that, the struggles I had in parenting Megan made me hungry and better prepared to be a parent to my 9-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I longed for that constant contact, and I couldn't have it with Megan. And so when I was fortunate enough to have another child, I really came into that role with a lot of excitement and passion around being a good parent. And I think the difference is, the world moves so fast. And I think that there's a perception of the world's not a safe place, or not as safe as it once was. And I try not to be that guy. I like to think that the world is a safer place, and that, you as a parent definitely have to funnel the information because it's out there. It's more readily available than it ever has been. But I think that the world in general is a safer place, and that you need to, extend some grace to your kids and not hover, let them stub their toe and let them make mistakes. And but I think you have to do it with the knowledge that, information is readily available, and there's a right time and a right place for kids to learn and see things. And so I think as a parent, that's the difference that I see today versus when Megan was a little girl, is that everything is right there. If the kids are inquisitive enough and, that little curious mind gets going, they can find, the answers to, pretty much any question if they're given the opportunity. And with Megan, it was more, she was seeking knowledge from her parents and her friends and her relatives, and not necessarily, hey, Siri.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how that impacts, the role of the parent when, we're basically integrating ourselves with this extended brain that I have in my hand. The context is so different just between your two kids, let alone, when you were a kid. What do you think is one of the biggest challenges between the context of your childhood versus your kids now?
I think it's choices. When I was a kid, you had fewer choices. You were going to go outside and play,
Mm-hmm.
because there was no other choice, unless you just wanted to sit and watch the 4 channels of television that you had to choose from. And so, today there's so many different choices that kids can potentially make as it relates to what they do with their time. And so as a parent, I try to help them with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I take away options.
Yeah.
You can have, you get screen time. It's 30 minutes a week,
Mm-hmm.
and it's done on the weekend. So Monday through Friday, you're doing school or whatever you're doing. And at the end of that, you're going outside, you're going to ride your skateboard, shoot baskets. My kid's into archery, go shoot some bow and arrow, like go swimming. But you're not going to sit in the house and watch television. You're not going to sit in the house and watch, an iPad.
Yeah.
And so Cotton gets 30 minutes a week of screen time. And so he's really forced to get out and move his body. Be creative.
Does he have difficulty finding other kids to do this with because the culture seems so, video games in the basement these days?
Definitely. The world I grew up in, I got on my bicycle and I rode around my neighborhood with a football under my arm, just hoping that I could see somebody outside so that we could go and start a game of something.
Yeah.
And today, kids are inside.
Mm-hmm.
And it's harder to find that neighborhood collaboration, but we push that. We have families that live in close proximity. And so when Cotton says he's bored, I tell him to get on his bicycle and go down and knock on doors.
Yeah.
And, as he's gotten older, and he's 9 going on 10, he's capable of kind of getting out. And my wife is a little more, protective than I am. And I'm like, he's fine. He's just fine. And, the challenge there is, not everyone has the same value system that I do. And so when he's over at a friend's house, there's the possibility that they're going to end up in the basement, playing Fortnite, which is something that we don't allow. And so, but at the same time, in an effort to allow our child to be social, when you're at their house, if that's what they want to do, that's fine. But when y'all come over here, that's not happening. We're going to swim in the pool. We're going to play wiffle ball. We're going to shoot baskets. We're going to skateboard, whatever. But you're not going to sit in the house and watch a screen.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to do that. My kids are 3 and 4. And so we spend as much time outside as possible just to, be consistent with the same line of thinking you have. So I'm an athlete, you're an athlete. We both want our kids to be participating in these things outdoor. Talk to me about, what I can expect from my 3 and 4-year-old, the impact of playing sports that on Cotton, your 9-year-old has had over the last 5 years.
Yeah. I think the thing that's neat about today is like everything's possible. Mm-hmm. And when I was a kid, you played baseball and football or soccer, and maybe you did some swimming. But that was pretty much what you did. And then there were some outlier sports that you might get into, but really it was baseball and football and basketball. And today, the world of opportunity for kids is much broader. Yeah. Whether it's, lacrosse or field hockey or archery. My son's, shooting an archery league and loves it. And so, I feel like when I was a kid, if you weren't good at those 3 sports, then sports was out for you. It was no longer an option. And today it's more about what is it that the kids really love to do, because there's probably some level of competition or team environment for them to participate. And so my child, my brother played football and I played football, and my son's 9 years old and he does not play football. Mm-hmm. And I could care less. Yeah. So, I did my time. I had my fun. I don't need my child to be a football player. Yeah. And he doesn't want to play football, which is fine. If he changes his mind and decides that he wants to play football, that'll be fine too. But what he's really passionate about is he loves fishing. Yeah. Which if you watch TV enough, you'll see that there's collegiate fishing teams. Mm-hmm. So he loves fishing. He loves archery. He likes to cycle. He's a good mountain biker. And so, we kind of focus on the athletics that he has a personal connection to versus trying to force him to do something that maybe is not in his heart.
Has that been a breeding ground for any particular qualities or interactive characteristics among other people?
I think, when you let a kid do what they love and something that they're good at, I think it creates character. Yeah. Cotton plays baseball and he likes to play baseball. And, there are kids on the baseball team that are a lot better than he is. And, he's old enough to see that and understand that. He continues to work at baseball because he likes it, and he gets better. But I think if all he did was baseball, I think that some of his identity would be built around, I'm not the best. Mm. And if you took all of the kids on his baseball team to a archery tournament, they would have a really hard time keeping up with Cotton as it comes to launching arrows. And so, his self-confidence is really high because there are things that he gets to do in an athletic arena where he is the better or the best. And so, I think that it's better for their just the whole person being able to do something competitively that they excel at versus being pigeonholed into a sport that a parent wants them to be in when they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, actually, I was listening to one of your other interviews, and you talked about in business, I don't remember the exact verbiage you used, but it was, good days and bad days fall on your face sometimes. Can you talk about, failure for your kids and what that means for them?
Yeah. You got to learn to fail because you're going to. Mm-hmm. And for me, quitting is really the only negative. If you're unsuccessful at something, but you continue to fight, you're still in the fight. I mean, my dad, I grew up with a father who was a little bit more rough and tumble. And he basically said, only time you've ever lost a fist fight is when you quit fighting. Yeah. So, if and it was a different time and day then, you could get into a scrap and you didn't go to jail for it at 9 years old. And so his message to me was, as long as you're still swinging, you haven't lost. Even though they may have got the better of you, you still have an opportunity to take the upper hand. And so, I think you have to learn that you're going to get knocked down and you're not going to have immediate successes. But as long as you stay in the fight, and I think that kind of goes to being gritty. You got to teach your kids to grind and to be gritty, and to accept some suffering and some disappointment and some failure, because that's the reality of life. Yeah. Let them fail when they're young, because they're going to fail when they're older. So teach them how to, absorb the failure. Again, be a learner. Why did you fail? What caused you to get to this point? And so how do you not do that again? But don't quit. Yeah. Quitting is not an option. It's what we say to Cotton constantly. Quitting is not an option. Yeah. You can be upset. You can be down. Go lick your wounds. But we wake up tomorrow and the sun rises and we have another opportunity. So there's no quitting. Quitting, not an option.
So when you guys play sports, say one-on-one basketball, ever let them win?
Certain sports, I let him win. Certain sports, I don't.
Yeah.
Like we play ping pong.
Yeah.
And I won't let him beat me in ping pong.
So how far away is he from actually being able to beat you?
Every day he gets a little closer. Every day he gets a little closer. But if we're out playing a game of horse, I'll miss some shots. But when it comes to ping pong, I won't let him beat me. And I think I do that because I want to see how much he'll push. Yeah. I think ping pong is a sport that kids can get really good at quickly. And so how hard is he willing to work because he wants to beat me? Yeah. And, as I've not let him beat me, I've seen that he's playing with his mother and anybody else who's at the house. He wants to challenge them to a little ping pong. So he's sharpening his skills and working on his game, but I will not let him beat me in ping pong.
How are you going to feel the day that, assuming the day comes, maybe you are better than him for eternity, but assuming that day comes, how are you going to feel about it?
I'll be proud of him.
Yeah, I love that.
and the reason I'll be proud of him is Cotton, is a left-handed writer, plays baseball right-handed, kicks left-footed, is right-eye dominant, and so he has kind of left and right-hand dominance confusion. And so, a sport that is exclusively hand-eye coordination for the most part, for him to get good enough to beat me at ping pong, he's having to overcome some obstacles to get there. And so I'll be very proud of him the day that he beats me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's just a fabulous way of thinking about it. So, 9-year-old, how do you keep him in his lane, when it comes to disciplining him when he's outside the behavior pattern you expect of him?
I would say, I'm not going to say that I don't spank my children, because I have, but it's not common.
Mm-hmm.
I think Cotton in his 9 years of life has maybe had 2 or 3 spankings, and that was for doing things that were egregiously wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think, there's a lot of power in communication. When I talk to Cotton about what he's done wrong, we do it in a very calm and controlled environment. I try not to get involved in the heat of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that people in general react well to someone coming at them who's very emotional.
Yeah.
And so while he's done things where I want to, shake him, I refrain. And I tell him at that moment, when we get home, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this. And when I speak to him about things that he's done that have left me less than excited, I do it in a very stern, matter-of-fact position. And, there are clear consequences to his actions, whether it is, taking his bow away, which kid shoots 100 arrows a day, that no bow, you've just lost your screen time. And now you're going to get to do some manual labor. Mm-hmm. So we've got a 120-pound ridgeback that's kind of like having a horse.
Yeah.
So here's a handful of bags. You get to go outside and pick up after Calhoun.
Good gracious.
For the next week.
Yeah.
All of a sudden the workload gets heavier and the play time comes down, and there's reminders.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, I know you don't want to go pick up the dog mess, but remember how we got here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember how we got here.
Every time you bend over and squeeze one of those things, it's a reminder of I wish I had done what I did.
Right. That's right.
Goodness.
Yeah. It was a shitty thing that you did. Shitty thing that you have to do now.
Perfect. But punishment fits the crime.
That's right.
Oh gosh, I had something that I wanted to ask you, and it's escaping me, but it was very much related to that. So I'll just jump into something else. So Cotton, do you see you in him? Is he a mirror of you?
There's similarities.
Yeah.
He's definitely his own man. There are things that we definitely share in our personalities, and definitely some physical. We look a lot alike. He looks like I looked when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Our mannerisms can be very similar, but then he's very different than I was. When I was a kid, I didn't have a lot of friends.
Mm-hmm.
I was rough, tumble, had a very aggressive father. And so, I was not the kind of kid that could, make friends easily. So I had my 3 or 4 core friends. And outside of that, being social was not my strength. Yeah. And Cotton is a very social kid. He's making friends and chatting people up, and, kind of hangs out with all walks of life. And, that's where he's very different than I was when I was younger. As an adult, I would say that I've, obviously grown, and I am a very social guy and personable, but as a child, I wasn't. Cotton is. So, certain things like that. I mean, we share. He's an outdoorsman. As a child, I was an avid outdoorsman. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be playing with the animals. The snakes, yeah. And he loves all that. He's kind of all boy, mm-hmm. and I was an all boy kind of kid too. But yeah, there are some very distinct differences between us as well.
Yeah. How about, what do you feel like is the role of a father? You can put it in context of your life or just in general.
Yeah, I think, the purpose of a father is to be a guide, and as a Christian, Jesus is our father, and spirituality is a guide on how to live your life. You love people and you treat folks with kindness and you turn the other cheek. So there's lessons that Christ has taught us about how we walk and how we live our life. And so as my role to Cotton and to Megan is to be a guide, to help show them the way, be a teacher, teach them right from wrong, teach them how to fail, teach them how to get up, teach them when it's time to fight and when it's time to flee. I think at the core, my job is to prepare my children to live a successful life, whatever success looks like for them, to be happy.
So how do you play that role? I mean, you've been wildly accomplished professionally and took this amazing trajectory into your career. And that's part of this conversation is people that have more than one passion, one of which being their career and one of which, of course, being your children. What's something that you do to help? I hate using the term balance, but for lack of a better term that I've yet to come up with, like how do you balance your profession and your family life?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's pretty cut and dry. When I'm working, I'm working. Mm-hmm. And when I'm not working, I'm not working. When I'm parenting or when I'm being the family man, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. And my wife, who was a very accomplished executive before she decided to stay at home with our child, I think it kind of drives her crazy because she was never able to unplug like I can. So, the reality is that it's going to be there in the morning. Mm-hmm. And so, while there are times when, we have very strategic things that are happening at work and require my attention for long periods of time, I stay in that moment until I'm not. Yeah. And when I'm not, I'm not responding to emails. I'm not taking phone calls. I'm with my family and serving in my capacity as father and husband. And so I think that, I'm pretty good at putting up, barriers to, crossover. I mean, there are always times when there's a little bit, yeah. But for the most part, when I'm present, I'm present with my family when I'm with them, and I'm present at work when I'm at work.
So is that something you had to practice? Because I know naturally I'm not that way at all. I've had to practice to be better at it. So what's practice like?
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to happiness, right?
Yeah.
So, when I was early in my career and focused so much on work, I can't say that I was terrifically happy. I was driven and I was passionate about what I was doing, but there was a certain level of joy that wasn't there in my life, which I was, in my kind of middle of my career. I was overweight. I didn't spend a lot of time taking care of myself. I'd had failed marriages, so I wasn't necessarily taking care of my family. But the one thing that was really going good for me was my career, because that's where I put all of my energy. And I had a bit of a revelation. I think it was around 30 years old where I had this moment where it was like, all right, dude, do you want to, find yourself one day absolutely miserable and extremely accomplished executive?
Yeah.
Or do you want to find some happiness and some joy in your life? And so I started focusing really on the three pillars, my family, which is also my faith, my health, mm-hmm. and my work. And it took some time, because when I got focused on taking care of my body, I got into doing triathlon, which is a very selfish sport. It's a bit narcissistic. You are working on yourself in three different disciplines all the time, and So when I started doing that, I started to have some success. And so the success in sport again really had me focused on, man, feels good. And so I need to do more here, and, did a couple Ironman races and got kind of crazy with it, and then realized, wait a second, and this is right before Cotton was born. Unfortunately for me, my wife did triathlon with me. And so we spent a lot of time doing that, but I came to the reality of, wait, okay, this isn't balance. I can't work the job that I have and spend 20 hours a week training for triathlon and then also be a parent. And so something's got to give. And so then it became, I like to cycle, so I'm going to do some cycling and I'm going to do a little bit of running, but I'm not going to train for an Ironman. I'm not doing that, so that I can have the energy and the time to dedicate to my newborn son and family. So I think that, you have to manage the swings. You have to, I think you have to be present to know that you're not present.
Yeah. So I want, that's great. I feel like I'm going through that transition now, and that was part of the inspiration for this podcast. But to anyone who is going through it or doesn't even know that they're so imbalanced, do you have any advice that you could offer to, the 28-year-old you that's in the midst of it? I
think you got to look at, how things are going. So, at work, I have a dashboard that tells me, how many stores have we opened? What are our same store sales? How are things working out? I think in life, you have to have a life dashboard. I think you have to step back and assess, how am I doing here? As an executive, is the company being run successfully? Is my staff receiving the attention that they need for me to do their job, for me to support them? And there have been times where the answer was no. You can do better here. And so, as it relates to your family, what's going on with your family? Are your kids happy? Is your wife happy? For me, spiritually, do you feel connected? Are you living a better life? Are you focused on helping others? Are you, how are you doing there? And so I think doing self-checks and, some of that can happen, while I'm training, when I'm on a bicycle and I'm in it, I'm, gassed and I'm tired and I'm going, and all of a sudden I find myself in my head thinking about, what if I was doing this at work? Can I afford to give work that without jeopardizing what I'm doing here right now on this bicycle or with my family? And so, I say, being present enough to know that you're not present, if you're in the moment and thinking about what you're doing, you can see that maybe I'm not really giving that piece of my life the attention that it needs. And always in life, you're going to have one pillar that's going to need a little bit more than the other. And so it's not that you're going to have absolute balance all the time. Sometime one piece of the one pillar is going to be much taller than the others, but it's not, you need to know that that's just for the time being. For instance, last year we went through a process where we sold Global Franchise Group from one private equity company to another, which required me to be on the road, on the computer, on the phone, significantly more than I am in a normal paced work environment. And so knowing that work was going to get the lion's share of my energy, I made sure that when I was home, it was very high quality, high touch time with my wife and my son. And, when I was on the road, I made sure that I got up and got on an elliptical machine and moved my body, because I don't do well when I'm not physically active. And so while I wasn't allowing myself 7 to 8 hours a week of exercise, I was managing to get, 3, 4, 5 good solid workouts and be home, be present, be in the moment. But then work was a big part of what I was doing last year. And so this year, as things have settled down, a lot more focus on the family and a lot more focus on fitness, and because I can afford to do it.
Yeah. And so being present enough to be present, the first time that you really identified that's where you were, like this, I'm not balanced. Was that a hard, a difficult transition, like a crisis almost, to make that transition? Because I occasionally feel like in crisis mode, and I'd imagine others do also.
Yeah, I think you got to have good people around you, right? So sometimes they help you see that. My dearest friend in the world is my brother.
Mhm.
And John's very honest with me, very transparent, and keeps me accountable. And my wife, who's um, the love of my life and the most important person in the world to me, also keeps me in check. And so she's like, "Hey, dude, like, get off your phone.
Yeah.
Can you put the phone down? We could use third. Yes. I'm sorry. Phone's down. Turn it off." So you got to have good people around you and people that are supporting you in being your influencers. It's kind of like when I was a kid. Dad always told me that you're going to be who you hang around with, and so if you want to be in prison, then hang around with a bunch of inmates.
Yeah.
And so putting good people around you who share a similar vision, I think, is important.
Yeah, and that the ability to be that kind of have that kind of self-assessment, to be that kind of honest with yourself, and to be open to that feedback, as opposed to your wife saying, "Hey, put the phone down." You get defensive and say, "This is important. I need to do this." To be in a place where you can set it down like that. I imagine that was a transition that went from being difficult to easy.
Yeah, but I think it's about a shared vision. Like Christy and I, we know what kind of life we want to live, and so when I'm getting feedback from her, I don't take it as pushback. I take it as feedback.
Yeah,
Um, Definitely we disagree on things from time to time, but at the end of the day, she and I are unified in the belief that there are really three critical pillars to our life, and in order for us to live the kind of life that we want to live and um, have the freedoms that we have, this is how this has got to work. And so she's on my team, so you listen to your teammates.
did you sit down and have that, to use the metaphor, did you like huddle up and say, "Here's the game plan"?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think
We
everybody does that.
we ask each other all the time, like, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah,
You know? And if you could, if there was one thing in your life that you could do differently today, what would it be?
yeah,
Um, and so I think, again, checking in, you got to check in. Life changes,
yeah,
things change. And as they change, how are you doing? And how are we doing? Are we still on track to be where we want to be when we grow up, or are we off track? And do we still want to be that? So I think that, again, it's about that dashboard, having that understanding as to where as a couple you want to be and how you want to live your life and what's important to you, and how you want to educate your children, and all of those things, and making sure that there's alignment and then there's accountability.
yeah, yeah. That's great. I hope that people listening, and I hope that I take it home as well, to actually go home and have that intentional conversation versus it just kind of haphazardly happening around us or by accident.
I think if you're intentional about it, then you have a plan.
Mhm.
If you're not, then you have disagreements. You have something as simple as schooling.
Yeah,
Christy and I, put our son in public school for the first several years of his education, and we were aligned that we had a good school that he could go to. And while we live in a bubble where most of our friends have their kids in private schools, we thought this is a good school, and we want our kid to be in a melting pot world, because that's the world we live in. And so we'll put him there until he until something tells us that this isn't the right place for him to learn.
yeah,
And Cotton was in public school all the way through third grade, and in the middle of his third grade year, he started to have some issues around school, and we could see that he wasn't learning and at the capacity that we thought he should. And so we kind of checked in and said, is this still right for him, and is it still right for our family? And the decision was, it might not be.
yeah,
And so we went out and did some searching, and we found a school that we both loved and felt really good about. And so, it was full court press. How do we get Cotton into this environment? Because we believe that this is what's right for him now.
Yeah.
And so instead of, having one parent who, internally is struggling with, I really think my kid should be at public school, but I'm going to let him go to a private school because that's what my wife wants. And like all of a sudden you have turmoil and conflict, which trickles down to your children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, kind of having a unified position and plan and being aligned in all things, I think is important for not only your marriage, but also, again, as a guide to your children. How do you want your children to interact with their significant other when they grow up?
Yeah.
Hopefully you want them to collaborate and be a team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. The being an example across all fronts, it seems to be a consistent theme, and I couldn't agree more. Bob, I'll ask you, I've got kind of a list of, I'll call them short answers or rapid fires, however you want to approach it. But what impact has having kids had on you?
Man, that's a broad question. I would say probably the most profound is just the acknowledgement of joy. Kids should be joyful. And I think that as you get older in life and life kind of beats you down, it's hard not to become a cynic, be very cynical. And just seeing joy in the play and fun. I think that I, continue to learn from my child that you've got to find joy in pretty much everything that you're doing. Because if it's not there, then what's the point?
Love it. What is on your not to-do list as a father?
I don't want to. I don't ever want my children to be ashamed of me. And nor do I want to shame my children. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there's anything good that comes from either of those places. And so I try to do things that would make my children proud. And at the same time, I don't ever want to shame them in a public environment to where they feel like they've, we can have a relationship about something and a discussion about something that's gone terribly wrong, but it doesn't need to happen in front of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the greatest hope that you have for your children?
Joy. I want my kids to be happy. Mm-hmm. We were put here to enjoy this place. And so I want them to be happy and to be joyful. And I don't think that, if the other pieces of their life aren't in place, then joy is very difficult to achieve. But if they're living a good life and they're doing the things that they love and they're excited about what the next day brings, I think I've done a good job.
Yeah. You're writing an autobiography, and you're on what chapter? What's the title of the chapter you're in now?
I feel like the title of the chapter is From Scoop to Score. I started my life out scooping ice cream in a marble slab creamery in a beat up marriage with a child that I couldn't support emotionally or financially. Mm-hmm. And I've worked really hard both on my career and on my personal life. And I think that I'm in a position where, I'm a good parent. I'm a good husband, a good person. And, I've positioned myself and my family to where we have a lot of financial freedom. And so, it didn't start out looking all that grand, mm-hmm. But now I find myself at a place where I've kind of, I don't think I've reached the top. I think there's a lot of room to go up, but I've definitely hit a place in my life where, I'm a stable guy and grounded and balanced, and that was not where I began this journey when I was some 23 years old.
Yeah, yeah. So how Who's your favorite television dad?
Favorite television dad? Yeah, that's a tough one. Favorite television dad? I don't really watch a lot of television. It's kind of hard to pull him out now, given some of his discretions. But I was a big fan of the Cosbys when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and I loved how he interacted with his kids. And so I liked Bill Cosby and his role in that show.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was funny. Caring and loving. He was funny, but he was also very wise.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, with Cotton has a great sense of humor, and so does Megan. They're both funny people, and I can come across and be pretty comical from time to time. And so I try to be funny and always be laughing. But then at the same time, when it comes down to the lessons, I think that I have a lot of wisdom that I can share. And so I like that.
Yeah. When do you feel the most love in your life?
I feel the most love in my life when I'm with my son, like on a daily basis. At the end of the day, me and my wife and my son and my 120-pound Ridgeback tend to end up on the couch.
Yeah.
And it's the end of the day. He's about to go to bed, and we're all just kind of there. And it's a very loving period of the day, and it's daily. So I'm very fortunate to have that.
The gift, if you could ask, or if money was no object, time, space, whatever, if you could give a gift to every single father on the planet, what gift would you give them?
Well, I mean, time. You said time was no object, money was no object. I think about the gift of clarity about what really is important in life. And to that point, it isn't money. It isn't things. Mm-hmm. It's moments. It's the moments that you have that you capture, and you can't ever let go of that. And so, the clarity of what is most important in life, and as it relates to being a father, understanding that this child that you've been blessed with, they're looking at you and learning constantly about how you're doing what you're doing. And so having that clarity of knowing that this is a gift and a privilege to have this child in my life. And so I'm going to stay focused on what is really important. And what's really important is that you love them, and you love them with your words. You love them with your time. You love them with your actions. And so I think that, the clarity to really see what's important as a father.
All right. I have three last questions. This one is, how would you describe the father you'd like to be remembered as?
I would like to be remembered as a father who was loving and consistent. I don't need to be remembered as the nicest guy, because sometimes as a parent, you're not nice. But you need to be consistent. And so, loving, I love my children, and, where I'm at with my son today is a very different place than I am with my daughter. My daughter's probably not happy with me because I'm loving her, and I'm trying to help her elevate her position and kind of find some balance in her life and some direction. And so, I am loving her. She's probably pissed at me, but that's okay because I'm consistent. I'm consistently trying to help her adult. Mm-hmm. And so, Cotton today thinks I hung the moon. We're hunting and fishing and playing, and, he's a little boy. And so, but I'm consistently, keeping the same messages in the background. If we're playing ping pong and he decides he's going to quit in the middle of the game, no, sir. Pick up the paddle, finish the game. And so being consistent and being loving, I'd like for my kids to remember me as those two things. And then also that, that I'd like to be remembered as a dad who did a good job, that they feel like when I leave this world, that they're in a better place because I was here.
Yeah. Well, then the billboard question: if you had a billboard in Atlanta downtown rush hour traffic that could fit one piece of advice to all parents out there, what would you put on that billboard?
Parenting advice?
Yes, sir.
Just love them.
Just love them.
Just love them. Love your kids. They're a gift. Mm-hmm. It's such a privilege. And as a father who, had a child early in life and then questioned whether or not he would ever have another child, didn't know. When that opportunity came around the second time, I was well positioned to be a dad because I had learned some tough lessons through divorce and separation of the child. And so, at the end of the day, you just got to love your kids. You just got to keep loving them. And sometimes loving them doesn't mean just hugging and coddling. It's, making the hard decisions and helping them make the right decisions. And even though it's difficult, you're still loving them. I used to have a coach when I was in college. When we had screwed up, we had to do what were called fifths. And it was a lap around the football field, the interior, which was a fifth of a mile. Mm-hmm. And, as I was, struggling to make it around the track on time, he would say, "Hey, Dull, I'm just loving you, son. I'm just showing you a little love right now." And he was. And so you just got to love him.
It's great. And my final question, in the event that this recording lasts forever, your kids, their kids, their kids, their kids all get to hear it. Any sort of, whether it's a piece of advice or an expression, of emotion, anything that you'd like to record for the benefit of the Dull family for generations.
You've been given one life to live, and every day is a gift. And so you should approach each day with that in mind. And if you're not finding joy in what you're doing, then you should be thinking about what you're doing.
It's great. Well, that's it. Thank you so much, Chris.
All right, man. I appreciate it.